Hi guys, my name is Michaela. I'm from Phoenix, Arizona, and today we're talking about present and past perfect. Hopefully we'll get a lot of good practice in and I can answer any questions that you guys have. I know people frequently have questions, especially on when it's appropriate to use each of those tenses. Form is not as hard as the actual context we use it in. So let's get going. Anna Carolina, welcome to class.
Hi again, Michaela.
Good to have you back. Anna Catalina,
Likewise.
about the present perfect. What do you know about the present perfect and how and when we use the present perfect?
Teacher, if to talk about something that happened and it still happen so far.
Yeah, that's one time when we use the present perfect, something that has been happening for a long time and is still happening and might continue to the future. That's one time when we definitely use the present perfect. Philip, welcome to class. Maybe he's still loading up. Philip, I can't hear you.
Oh.
There you are. Okay. Philip, tell us what you know about the present perfect and when we use the present perfect. Oh no. Still can't hear you, Philip. I will come back to you in just a minute. Rohan, how about you? Tell us what you know about the present perfect and when is the right time to use it.
Present perfect you use when you are doing something right now.
Yeah, okay. Sometimes that happens if something like was really recently completed or if it has some kind of connection to the present, although it is different than the present continuous. Sometimes we define the present continuous as something that's happening right now. So there's like a little bit of overlap with those definitions, but you're right that that's kind of related to present perfect.
Yeah.
Mateus, good to have you here. Tell us what you know about the present perfect.
We can use it to say about something what finished yet.
To say something about something. Yes, that's true. Yeah, and you said something that's not finished yet, right?
Just finished.
Yeah, something that just finished or something that is not finished yet. Both of those are occasions when we would want to use the present perfect. Okay, Ahmed, how about you? Tell us about the present perfect and when you think it's appropriate to use.
Present perfect when I have the PP plus PP.
Wait, what?
It's when I say I have that plus as a part participle. That's right. Because I'm not giving my mind the name of each sentence. I just know how to use them.
Yeah, exactly. I think you're on the right track, and sometimes it's hard to put into words, but yeah, I think you're on the right track there. And Philip, can you hear us? Can we hear you?
Yes, teacher.
Awesome. Okay, Philip, tell us what you know about the present perfect and when you can use the present perfect.
The present perfect is when an action started before when you are speaking and it still continue. The action still continue the time you are talking.
Yes, that's an excellent definition. I think that's a really good definition. It's like very well worded. Those are great words to use. I love it. And I've got one more. Sorry, my screen froze a little bit, so I'm going to refresh my. Sorry about that, guys. I got a little stuck there, had to refresh. Zach, welcome to class. Tell us what you know about the present perfect and when is a good time to use the present perfect.
Hi. I just heard somebody answered very correctly, I think. When an action has taken place sometimes in the past, and not quite sure that it's not that it's still in action.
So we have a lot of definitions. I think you're right, and we're going to talk about some of these distinctions. We're going to talk about present perfect and past perfect today. We're going to start with present perfect, and I think present perfect is a lot more difficult than the past perfect because we have a larger variety of times when the present perfect might be appropriate. And I heard you guys say these, but there are some graphs here to represent some of the situations you guys were talking about. So the first one is when the action okay, so we use the present perfect for actions in the past which have a connection to the present, and the time when these actions happened is not important. So an example of this first one would be something like, I have been to the United States. So even though it is a past action that's finished, we're talking about the experience of being there. And the experience is something you keep, right? So like, even though you're not there now, you still have the experience of being there. So it has a connection to the present, which is why it's called the present perfect. It has this connection to the present, even though it's a past action. That one is sort of, I think, some of the most difficult one to describe, even though it's very commonly used that way. The next one, which again I heard some of you say, is when something was very recently completed in the past. So you might say, oh, I've just finished my test and I'm ready to go out. So that means like just moments before is when you finished it, and it has that connection to the present. It's connected because it just occurred, like just right now, just a couple moments ago. And the last graph we have here is for something that started in the past and continues, which is something I heard a couple students mention as well. That would be something like, I have been taking English lessons every Tuesday for 4 years, meaning that until now, like you continue to take lessons on Tuesday. Maybe today is Wednesday and you don't have a lesson that day, but it means next Tuesday you will have another lesson. So it's something that started in the past and continues to the future. Another example of this one would be something like, I've been sick all week. I have been sick all week, meaning it started in the past and it continues up until now. You've been constantly sick since it started in the beginning of the week until now. So they all have a connection to the present, even though their connection might be slightly different. Do you guys have any questions on these graphs or the appropriate times before we go on and look at some vocabulary? No? Okay, I guess that's good. So let's look at some vocabulary. If we go down, we have some time expressions with the present perfect, even though we can't use specific, like really specific times. And we'll talk about that more in just a second. I'm going to ask one of you guys to read these time expressions. How about Zach? Will you read those time expressions for us?
Time expression with the present perfect, since, with a specific year or a period in the past, since 2002, since I was a child. For, with a number of years, for 20 years. Ever and yet, in questions and negatives, have you ever, hasn't been yet. Already and never, just between have, has, and the verb, has already, finished, have just been. Before since, for, already, many times, so far, yet, at the end of the sentence, or questions.
Mhm.
Have you been there before?
Awesome. Thank you for reading, Zach. So those are some common phrases that can let you know the present perfect is appropriate. So if you see, like, we're going to do some fill in the blank sentences, if you see some of those words, it can clue you in that the present perfect might be an appropriate tense. But I have a sentence, and it has, well, let's look at this sentence. I put it in the chat box, and I'm going to put it in the Google chat box as well. The sentence is, I've been to France in 1999. So someone tell me about that sentence. Is it a good sentence or is it a bad sentence, and why? I've been to France in 1999. Does anyone know if that's good or bad?
I think you have to add since before 1999.
Okay, you're on the right track. I like your suggestion, though that doesn't totally fix the problem. It does kind of get there. So he said, instead of in, use since. So the problem that Ahmed saw and is trying to fix is that normally with present perfect, we cannot use specific dates. It's not possible with the present perfect. The only exception there is if we're using since. And the reason it's an exception is because that gives us a start date, and we're saying until now. So we usually cannot use a specific date because the present perfect refers to a period of time or something that's happening until now, or an experience that you've had. So you can't put a direct date on it because it's like a period, right? It's not a specific event. But if you say since, you're talking about the beginning of a period. So since 2005, I've been healthy. I haven't been sick. Since 2005, I haven't been sick, meaning since 2005 until now, I have this whole period. So let's go back to the sentence I wrote. I've been to France in 1999. He said, I've been to France since 1999. Now, that's a good sentence, but it changes the meaning of the sentence, right? The meaning is changed. So that would mean beginning in 1999 until now, I went to France. So somewhere between 1999 and now, I did go to France. But what I probably meant in the first sentence is that in 1999, I went to France. So how can we keep the meaning from the original sentence and change the problem? Does anyone have a suggestion?
Using the past simple.
Yeah, that's one way to do it, to change it to the simple past. I went to France in
Simple
1999. Yeah. So you can either change it to simple past. If you're just talking about one event that's over and done in a specific time period, you'll want to use the simple past. Or, of course, you can get rid of 1999 and keep it a present perfect sentence. Or, like Ahmed suggested, you can make it some kind of period. So, like, since 1999, I've been to France 3 times. That would mean, like, those don't give specific events, but you can do something similar to what Ahmed said. It changes the sentence a little bit, but it's a good sentence. Do you guys have any questions about that?
I have a question. The right sentence is a past simple. I was in France in 1999.
We have options here. So the problem with this sentence is that we cannot use a specific date for a present perfect sentence. So our options are get rid of the date. That's one option. I've been to France, period. Or change the sentence to the simple past. I went to France in 1999. Or if you're trying to make a different sentence, if you're trying to talk about a period, you could use since. Since 1998, I've been to France 2 times, or 1 time, or I've been to France if you're trying to create a period. So that's another way to do it. Those are our 3 options for correcting this sentence. All right, and Mohammed, welcome to class.
Thank you.
Good to have you here with us. So let's try some of these sentences. We saw the occasions we use them, we saw some of the vocabulary that's related, and we talked about how specific dates are not something we see very frequently with present perfect unless you're creating that period of time. So let's try out some sentences. I'm going to give you each a specific example, like a specific chart, graph, that's the word I'm looking for, a specific graph to try to make a sentence of. So this first graph that represents something related to the present, like I've been to France once or something, an experience happened in the past that maintains, I'm going to ask Zach and Rohan to make a sentence in the present perfect that is an example of the first graph there. And if you can, try to use some of the vocabulary we talked about as well. Philip and Mohammed, try and make a sentence that's an example of the second graph. That would be something like, I've just finished my exam. So something that's finished but very recently completed. And again, if you can fit in some of the vocabulary we talked about, you get bonus points. That's definitely a plus. And then the last graph is for Mateos, Ana Carolina, and Ahmed. So you guys get something that started in the past and continues until now. And it could be something like, I've been sick all week, or I've been taking English lessons every Tuesday for 4 years. And when you guys are ready, put those sentences in the chat box. And if you're fortunate enough to be the first person done with their sentence, or like the second person done with their sentence, I encourage you to write another sentence. So maybe you did the third graph, you want to try out the first graph. You guys are welcome to get creative, put in multiple sentences, and try things you're not sure about. Try some stuff that's like risky. That way we can talk about it, because if you're wrong, that gives us some information and some material, and that'll help everybody learn a little bit more. So be creative. Don't be afraid to get it wrong. I think it's very helpful when we get some stuff wrong.
Teacher?
Yeah, question?
Yeah, I didn't hear my name. What should I do?
Yours is the first one. The
Okay.
present perfect represented by the X that's far away from the now, meaning an experience or something that you did in the past but is related to now.
Okay, yeah.
We've got a couple sentences already in the Google chat box. I've been down in the dumps since something that I consider unfair happened to me. It hasn't been the same so far. Okay, excellent sentence. I would change that comma to a period and start a new sentence there. And instead of saying so far, I would probably say since. It hasn't been the same since the change. Because when you say so far, you mean it was like that and it's continuing, but you want to make that like beginning period. It began at this particular time, and since that time, things haven't changed. Other than that, it looks great. I've been down in the dumps. Next one, I've been working for my company since 2011. Wonderful sentence, Ahmed. Very safe sentence, but it's wonderful, no errors there. I've been playing the piano ever since I was a child. Awesome. That one seems like, kind of seems like the last graph, but I think it's a good sentence. Maybe it could be the first graph. We have some overlap there. Thank you very much. I've always liked it. Wonderful sentence, Mateos. I have been working since 1999. Anna Catalina, what's your question? Ever since? Oh, yes, yes. So instead of so far, you could say ever since. It hasn't been the same ever since. Excellent replacement. I like that change. The rain just has stopped. Awesome sentence, but we need to reorder where you have your adverb. So I would put the adverb between has and stopped. And we're actually going to talk about that a little later in class. Adverb placement can be tricky, but it will nearly always go between has and stopped if you have a present perfect sentence. And the next one, I have been a vegetarian all my life. Perfect, wonderful. We've got one more in the Verbling chat box. I've just passed my master's degree. Okay, that's a good one. I would say master's degree with an apostrophe S. So I've just passed my master's degree. Or instead of passed, you might want to say something like graduated. You can pass a class, but usually a degree, we wouldn't say pass a degree. We'd say graduated, or maybe even something more formal like attained. I've just attained my master's degree. I've just achieved my master's degree. Something like that.
Teacher?
All right. Yeah, question?
Yes. The first graphic and the last one, they are easier to understand, but the second, you know.
The second graph is more difficult to understand.
Yes.
I think the second one is also a little difficult. Not everyone finds it difficult, but for me, I think it seems the most outside of what is expected. But you can kind of think of the second graph as representing a situation. You might say something like, well, you can say something like, I've been sick all morning, but that one would be more like the third graph. The second graph is when you have just recently finished it, like just that moment. So you're kind of bringing it into the present, even though it's something that you just finished in the past. I've just completed my essay. I've just, and you would probably use an adverb for that one. I've recently been feeling sick.
Teacher.
Yeah.
When you when you said I've been recently been feeling sick, I think of the third graphic.
There
The
is
second
overlap here, so it is kind of more like the third one, but Mohammed just put in an excellent sentence that I think is a great representation of the second graph. And he said, the rain has just stopped. So he's using the present perfect about something that's over, right? The rain has just stopped. So the rain is over. He's using the present perfect to show that it was happening, and then just recently it was finished and over.
Okay, thank you. Now it's clear.
Awesome. Yeah, sometimes the right example is all we need to really make it clear. Thank you, Mohammed, for putting that in the chat box for us.
Excuse me, I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead. What's your question?
Okay, the present perfect in the first graph case, and the present perfect in the third graph case. Okay, what is the difference in the structure? So, for example, if I said I have been to France, okay, which case, the first case or the third case?
The first case. So the first case talks about experiences that happened, but that the experience is related to the present. So the last one is something like a pattern of events. Every Tuesday this thing happens, or I've been feeling such and such a way for a period of time, 2 weeks, right? So that's something that's been on and off or constant for a period of time. The very first graph represents one occasion that you continue to keep with you in the form of an experience. So I went to France once, we'll say in 1995, let's pretend. I went to France in 1995, but you say, I've been to France, meaning that even though I just went one time, I have that experience and I keep it with me.
Okay.
All right. These are kind of tough, and we'll have to get a little more practice with them. But do you guys have more questions? Because this is a good time to ask all these kind of tough questions. If you guys continue to think of questions as we go along, you're welcome to bring them up at any time.
So I have another question, please.
Go ahead. Yeah, ask.
Can you give me an example for the present perfect in the third case without verb plus ing?
Oh, interesting. Okay. I've gone to the same dentist for years.
May I, teacher?
I've gone to the same dentist for years, meaning that frequently, maybe one time a year, I go to that dentist, and it's been happening for a period of time. I've gone to the same dentist for years.
May I?
Yeah, go ahead. Give us another one. I can always use help there.
I've lived in this town.
Yes,
For
I've lived in
40
this
years.
town. Great. Does that answer? Does that make sense? Another one I see in the chat box, in the Google chat box. I feel sick since last week, which I think is a good representation of the last graph, although we're having a little form issue with the present perfect. I've felt sick since last week would be a perfect example of a non-continuous version of the present perfect representing the third graph. All right, any other questions? Or do you guys want any other examples? Okay, then we are going to jump ahead and start to talk a little bit about the past perfect. And we have some similar graphs that hopefully will be illuminating and not confusing. But let's talk a little bit, and you guys can look at these graphs and tell me a little bit about what you already know about the past perfect. Zach, what do you already know about the past perfect?
Is past perfect can be used for an action that took place in the past, and it before another action that was taking place in the past. It is in the far past, maybe.
Yeah. I think that's a really good explanation of it. So the reason we use the past perfect is always to create a timeline. We have to use the past perfect in conjunction with another tense. So you'll always see, sometimes it's not all in one sentence, sometimes you'll use two sentences to create the proper context, but we have to have more than one event to which one is before the other. That's the only time we use the past perfect. So you would not use the past perfect by itself with no other context. You have to tell that there are two events and one happened before the other. So we use the past perfect to differentiate which event happened first. Okay, does anyone else want to give us more information that they think is important before we go over these graphs really quick? Anyone else have a tip for us on using past perfect?
Okay, I have one. I think the past perfect is the past of the past, right?
It's the past of the past, exactly. So at the time you were in the past, there was something even more past than that.
Yeah.
Awesome. Good way to explain it. Anyone else have a tip for us on how we use it, or anything they think that's worth sharing with your fellow students about the past perfect? Okay, then we'll do a quick explanation of these graphs, but I think these graphs will seem a little easier. I think the past perfect is a little easier than the present perfect. So The first one is something that happened around the same time, but before another event. So we've got two events, and one happened before the other, but it's got this yellow circle here because it doesn't specify what time. So with past perfect, you don't always have to specify. In fact, frequently you do not specify when something happened. So that's why we have that yellow circle. We don't know when that event happened. All we know is it was before a different event. The second one is a period of time, when you have an event that continued for a period of time but then stopped in the past. So I'll give you guys an example of this one. For a week, I had been feeling sick, but then I went to the doctor's and he gave me medication. So for a week, I had been feeling sick, but then I went to the doctor's and he gave me medication. So I used the past perfect in conjunction with the simple past to show there were two events and a period of time. So it started here, then I was feeling sick. This blue X is when I went to the doctor. And then the very last one is much simpler. It's the simplest form. It's when one event happened before another event, and that one you sometimes add in specific dates. So with the past perfect, you can use specific dates. Any questions about these graphs?
Yes.
What's the question?
I cannot see the difference between the first and the third.
So the first one, the biggest difference is that it doesn't talk about when an event happened. It's an unspecified event. It's sort of similar to this one here, the first graph in the present perfect, because you're saying that something happened, but you're not telling us when. It's not important. It's like, I had been to France before I went to the United States. So you had some kind of experience before another kind of experience, but we didn't specify when. All you know is that this one, the US, happened after France, but it doesn't say when this one happened. And then the last one would be similar, but you could add in dates. Like on Tuesday, I had written my essay, but then on Wednesday, I rewrote it. So I had written my essay on Tuesday, but on Wednesday I rewrote it, meaning one happened, and then the next one happened after. Ugh. Does that kind of answer your question, or do we need more examples here?
Teacher, if we carry on, I will understand the graphics.
I think you're right. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about vocabulary, and then we're going to make our own examples here. Oh, yeah. So we have a little bit more information. This one's kind of tough to read. The formatting's not great, so I'm going to read it for us. The time expressions already, for, since, and yet may be used in the past perfect simple, as they are in the present perfect simple. Remember the following rules for using other time expressions. So these are ones that we use frequently with the past perfect simple. After, as soon as, the moment that, and until. Those are very frequently used in the past perfect. So we have a couple examples here, and they use that vocabulary. Let's have Mohammed read it for us.
After she had moved out, I found her notes. I didn't say anything until she had finished talking. Before, when, by, the time, before the past simple. Before I knew it, she had run out the door. By the time he found her, she had found someone new.
Awesome, thank you. So we have some up here that are used after, and these down here that are used before. And we already kind of talked about this, but we have a quick note. Unlike the present perfect, it is possible to use a specific time word or phrase with the past perfect. Although it is possible, it is usually not necessary. So we saw that before, and we're going to get another example of it in a second. But before we go into more complex examples, let's just do some of these already. You see some of the vocabulary. I encourage you guys to use some of this vocabulary, especially if it's something you're not really sure of or you don't really know how to use. This is a great chance to try it out, and then we'll talk about how it works. So I'd like everyone to make a past perfect sentence using some of that vocabulary. And you can try and use these graphs to model off of, but it's not necessary. I think these graphs are less important for the past perfect. So use the vocabulary, try and think about those graphs as you're forming your sentences, and put them in the chat box whenever you're ready. And of course, if you guys have remaining questions, this is a really good time to ask them. Okay, awesome. I really like Anna Carolina's sentence. It's very appropriate. As soon as she asked, I had sent my sentence. So we know that, well, that one's kind of funny actually. It's a good sentence, but I'm a little confused about the events in that sentence. Because if you were going to say, as soon as she asked, I had sent my sentence, usually the past perfect is the thing that happens first, right? So what you're saying in that sentence is that you sent your sentence before I asked for the sentence. It's a little bit confusing. I would try that one again and maybe reorganize it a little bit.
Okay.
Next one I see, I went to the bus station, but the bus had left. Excellent. So the bus left before he went to the bus station. All right. I had talked to her before I arrived at my hometown. Great sentence. The tense is perfect. We want to say at hometown, not to my hometown. I had never talked to her before I arrived at my hometown. Awesome. You're playing around with negatives and the word never, which is a great way to see how these things work. Both sentences were awesome aside from the preposition. So as soon as she had asked us, I sent my sentence. Yes, that's a much better way to say it. As soon as she had asked us, I sent my sentence. So now it's clear that I asked first and you sent your sentence after. Let's check out the verbal chat box. I had been a professional soccer player before I became an accountant. Awesome. Thank you very much, Philip. Before I came to the US, I used to live in Europe. Great. That's kind of an interesting one too, because it doesn't actually use the past perfect, although it does use a different kind of past, which I like very much, which is that used to form. And it's used to is kind of used really similarly to the perfect tenses because it's talking about something that happened over a period of time. So it's an excellent sentence. By the time I return to Europe, I will become an old man. Awesome sentence. Again, no, I don't see past perfect in there, but it's a really good example of how we use multiple tenses. So you're talking about used by the time, and you use the simple present in the first part and the simple future in the second part to talk about something. And I like that combination. Combination of tenses is interesting. We've got a few more in the Google chat. I had been eating fast food until my weight reached 100 kilograms. Yes. And until my weight reached, yeah. Yep. All right. The moment that I entered the room, she had already been there. I moved I moved your adverb a little bit, and it's similar to what I mentioned a few moments ago with a different sentence. We use the adverb between have and the participle. The moment that I entered the room, she had already been there. So I think that's a good sentence, although I think it's a little bit odd because you're saying a specific moment. She had already been there before a specific moment. So I might just say, when I entered the room, she had already been there, or you could add in more detailed information like, the moment I entered the room, I discovered that she had already been there. That would make it make a little more sense. Next one, after I had lifted too many weights at the gym, we need that to be plural, weights. After I had lifted too many weights at the gym, I strained a muscle in my back. Excellent sentence. I love it as long as you make weights plural. After my car had broken, I had taken that to the mechanic. Yes, that doesn't need to be two sentences because of the word after. We need more. The word after is preparing us for that other part of the sentence. So I would make that one sentence. After my car had broken, I took it to the mechanic. So we would change it to took because when we use the past perfect, we need to show which one happened first and which one happened second. So one of them needs to be in the past perfect and the other one needs to be in a different tense, the simple past usually. Do you guys have any questions now that we've talked a little bit about some of these sentences? Any remaining doubts or uncertainties about what we talked about? Yeah, this one's simpler, I think. A little bit simpler than the present perfect. So, after it had dawned on me that my sentence was confusing, I fixed it. Yes. Excellent, Anna Carolina. Thank you very much. Okay. If you guys have remaining sentences, you can continue to put them in the chat box, and we will read them again in a little. But for now, well, we're going to read a quick note on the time, and then we're going to get to adverb placement, which some of you guys have been trying out, and we're going to talk a little more how it works. So this one's kind of an interesting little note. Let's have Mateos read it for us.
In the past perfect action did occur at a specific time. The simple past can be used instead of the past perfect when before or after is used in the sentence. The words before and after actually tell you what happens first, so the past perfect is optional. For the reason, both sentences below are correct. Example: she had visited her Japanese relatives once in 1993 before she moved in with them in 1996. Or, she visited her Japanese relatives once in 1993 before she moved in with them in 1996.
So sometimes that past perfect is optional, especially if you're using specific times. It already tells us, right? So the point of the past perfect is to tell us which event happened first, but if you're already using dates, it's pretty simple to know which event happened first, and we don't really need it as much. Any questions on that? On the timing? All right, I've got at least one more sentence that I didn't read, so I'll read that one now. After he had landed the job, he started to misbehave. Yeah, wonderful sentence, Philip. That's how it always works. People land a job and then they misbehave. Okay. Let's go on to adverb placement then. We're going to talk quickly about some of these. Adverbs are really hard. Adverbs are sort of this mysterious thing where depending on what kind of adverb, you might put it in a different place. Sometimes it goes before the sentence starts. Sometimes it goes near the verb. Sometimes it goes at the end of a sentence. They're sort of tricky. But when we're talking about the present and past perfect, it gets actually pretty simple. We know just where to put the adverb. So we're going to talk a little bit about these adverbs, I'm going to have someone read the list of adverbs for us. How about Philip? Will you read the list of adverbs for us?
Always, constantly, still, just, only, ever, frequently, generally, infrequently, never, normally, occasionally, often, rarely, seldom, sometimes, regularly, usually.
Thank you very much. So those are the ones that we're going to use. And here are a couple examples of how they're used. And this time I'll ask Anna Carolina to read those examples.
You had previously studied English before you moved to New York. Had you previously studied English before you moved to New York?
Excellent. The only real difference in that sentence is like the tone, which I think you nailed. The tone is really good. But if you'll notice, in the first one, we've got the adverb right between the have verb and the participle. So it works that way for past and present perfect. And then the second sentence, you've got it between both still, but you've got the subject there as well. So it just changes a little bit. And I want you guys to try this out. So this time, you guys are going to choose an adverb. And you're going to write a sentence either in the past or the present perfect, whatever you want to practice more, whatever you think you need more work on. And you're going to try and put in the adverb in the correct spot. It shouldn't be hard, but I would also recommend using an adverb that you don't have a lot of experience with. For instance, I know seldom is one students don't have a lot of experience with. This one here, seldom. Or one that you don't see very frequently. Try and use one that you're not very familiar with. That way we can get more practice with it and talk about how it is that it works. So one more sentence, guys. This time it's your choice. Present perfect, past perfect, and try and play around with it. Make a negative sentence or make a question. Make a statement that is unusual. Use different vocabulary, something that you're unsure of or something that confuses you. Chances are, if you find it confusing, you're not the only one, and it will be a really good way for us to segue into other topics of things that people aren't sure of and correct them. Okay, I love the first sentence I see. I have seldom have time to do my homework. It's an excellent sentence. The adverb is in the right spot. There's just one mistake, and it has to do with the participle. Zach, would you like to correct your own participle error? I don't hear Zach with any suggestions. Okay. So no, you corrected something that did not need correcting. The problem with your original sentence is the participle of have is had, H-A-D. So I have seldom had time to do my homework. I have seldom had time to do my homework. Awesome. That would make your sentence totally correct. It was a very minimal error. And yeah, it's a good one. Thank you, Zach. Had ever wrote a letter before? So I assume you meant letter, right, Mohammed? Maybe? I don't hear you. So I'm going to assume you meant letter, because litter is not something that you write. Litter is a totally different thing. Okay. So, assuming you meant letter, we still need to change it a little bit. First of all, you use the simple past of the word write, so it should be written. Had, and we're missing a subject there. So it should be, had you ever written a letter before? And I'll put that in the chat box, the final correction. Have you, or sorry, you said had. Had you ever written a letter before? And I like that example a lot because it plays with the adverbs as well as past perfect, and it's a question. He was going way out on a limb there, and it became a good sentence once we fixed it. Okay. I seldom have, oh yeah, that was the correction. Okay. I have seldom thought a lot before to write something. Interesting. It's a good sentence. The adverb is perfect. I would just change the order a little bit. I have seldom thought maybe a lot about writing something. I have seldom thought a lot about writing something. So instead of before, use about. And change to write to writing. All right. You guys can continue to come up with examples and write them in. I'm going to look at the VerbLink chat. I see a couple great examples. He used to visit me a lot, but now she visits me seldomly. Interesting. Okay, that works. So you used seldomly, which is actually the same adverb, just a different form of it. Both are totally acceptable. And you put it at the end, which is another appropriate place to put it. And the reason that it's better, or it could work at the end there, is because it's attached to the chunk of the sentence that uses the present. And the other one uses used to visit me. So although we don't have a perfect phrase in there, we don't have the present or the past perfect, it's a pretty well-written sentence. Thank you, Rohan. Okay, next up. My brother had seldom paid a visit to my parents. I love that sentence because it combines what we were talking about last class with what we're talking about this class, pay a visit. My brother had seldom paid a visit to my parents. Excellent sentence, Philip.
Thank you.
All right, a couple more in the Google chat box. Ahmed, what's your question there?
Your question is, had you ever written a letter before? I'm asking about if we can use have. Have you ever written a letter before?
Yes, you definitely can. I would say if you only have that sentence, it probably is best to use in the present perfect. Have you ever written a letter before? Now, had you ever written a letter before is also correct, but it's one of those situations where we need more context to really understand it, because the past perfect only works if you're creating a timeline. So for this load of sentences, when you guys, I haven't actually been correcting for context because I know you guys, we talked about it and you guys know, but in the past perfect, you always have to have another tense that justifies the past perfect. So the sentence is perfectly fine in the present or the past perfect, but if you're going to use the past perfect, you will usually have to explain kind of why you're using it, because you can only use it in context with other tenses.
Okay, so another question, please. Can we use it in the? Can we say had you ever write a letter before?
Yeah. Oh, sorry, no. Write with
yes,
a W-R-I-T-E. No.
Yes. In
so
the present, in the
have
past
you
simple.
ever write in the what?
In the past simple. Had you ever
that would
write
be did you ever write?
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So we would use the auxiliary did with that one.
Thank you.
And we've got one more in the Google chat box. Have you already written to me? Excellent. That's kind of similar to the one we were just talking about. Well-written sentence. Thank you, Mateos. Okay, we just did a lot. We talked about a lot. There's lots of vocabulary. Do you guys have any other remaining questions about this or about anything else? No questions? Awesome. So, one more sentence in the Google chat box. I seldom had such a great idea. Or I had seldom had such a great idea. Okay, awesome. Excellent sentence. And this is another one that kind of shows that, like, it's a good sentence in the past perfect. If you were going to use it in the real world, you would need to provide more context for why you're using it. But by itself, it works. By itself, it's a good sentence.
Teacher,
Yes.
when you say I've been, the adverb is between have and been?
For both, you should use it between your have and the participle. So have ever been, have already been, had seldom been, had usually been. The adverb will always go in the middle of the two verbs that you use to create the present or past perfect.
But if you use three verbs, I have usually been writing.
Then you would put it still between the have and the participle. I had frequently been writing letters.
Thank you.
Yep. Excellent question. We didn't talk a lot about the continuous, but that's important to know as well. Okay, so I have one more class coming up today, so I'm going to let you guys all go. If you do have more questions about this, you're welcome to message me on my Verbling account. Just send me a little message. I think you have to like request a tutor or something, but you can just send me a message, no problem. So I will talk to you guys again soon, hopefully. And thank you guys for coming and participating and being creative with your sentences. We got some creative sentences, and that's really helpful. It shows other students how things work, and it makes class a little more interesting.
Thank you.
All right, guys. Thank you, and I will see you all again soon. Bye.
See you.